Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a historic, honestly cinematic collision between Silicon Valley and the United States government. We are looking at an abrupt, completely unprecedented event that fundamentally changes how we understand technology, national security, and our everyday access to the tools we use to build the future. Let's dive in.
So, picture this. It's exactly 5:21 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, June 12, 2026. Developers all over the country are in the zone, running code, wrapping up their projects for the week. And then suddenly, mid-session, their tools just crash. A massive technological rollout was completely wiped from the internet, literally in the blink of an eye. The U.S. government had dropped an export control directive on Anthropic, and the sheer breadth of it was staggering. It cited national security concerns and demanded they suspend all access by any foreign national, whether inside or outside the U.S. Now, because it is virtually impossible to perfectly filter out non-U.S. citizens on a moment's notice, Anthropic had no choice. They had to pull the plug completely. They shut down their brand new models for everyone, everywhere, just to ensure compliance. Talk about whiplash, right? Fable 5 launches on June 9th to massive hype. Rapid adoption follows. For 2 days, people are building incredible things. Then, June 12th hits. The directive lands at 5:21 p.m., and just 4 hours later at 9:21 p.m., public access is terminated. In exactly 3 days, a highly anticipated, game-changing tool just vanished into thin air. Well, what exactly did we lose? We aren't talking about standard AI here. Fable 5 was their brand new flagship consumer model, and Mythos 5 was their state-of-the-art cybersecurity model from Project Glasswing. To put the reasoning capabilities into perspective, during testing, Mythos 5 was so highly logical, it actually beat the game Pokemon Fire Red, which is something earlier models entirely failed to do. And in an instant, both of these incredibly powerful systems were just disabled globally. Section 1. The investigation. The jailbreak disagreement. To really understand the government's fear here, we have to talk about a universal jailbreak. Think of it like a master key. It's a method that broadly bypasses an AI's safety guardrails, unlocking a wide range of restricted and potentially dangerous capabilities, like advanced cyber attacks. For national security, this is basically the ultimate nightmare scenario. But here's where the story gets really fascinating, because there is a fundamental disagreement over what constitutes an actual threat. The U.S. government believes someone demonstrated a dangerous jailbreak method, which justified an immediate, heavy-handed export control directive. Anthropic strongly disagrees. They claim the vulnerability wasn't a universal jailbreak at all. Instead, they argue it was a benign, narrow prompt, essentially just asking the AI to read a specific codebase and fix minor, already known software bugs. They publicly stated the directive completely lacks technical grounding. And Anthropic didn't just disagree, they pointed straight to their track record. They use a massive defense-in-depth strategy. We're talking thousands of hours red-teaming these models with US and UK safety institutes. They actually made the guardrails so incredibly strict that everyday customers were complaining about them being too aggressive. They even instituted a highly controversial 30-day customer data retention policy specifically to monitor and patch vulnerabilities. They designed the system to make executing a true universal jailbreak extraordinarily expensive and difficult. But here's the real kicker. Anthropic's ultimate defense rests on a very simple fact. The specific capability the government was terrified of, reading code and fixing bugs, is already widely available right now. Rival models, like OpenAI's GPT 5.5, can do the exact same thing without even needing a jailbreak. It's a standard tool that cyber defenders use every single day. So pulling Fable 5 offline doesn't actually remove this capability from the public sphere at all. Section 2. The geopolitics of AI. A global race disrupted. So, legally speaking, the mechanism used here is critical. The directive acts as a deemed export control, legally blocking any foreign national from accessing the tech. But practically, that meant Anthropic's very own non-US engineers, the actual people who built the models, were suddenly locked out of their own work. This severely cripples the US tech talent pool, making it incredibly difficult for American labs to employ top global minds. You know, this Friday night shutdown didn't just happen out of nowhere. The Washington Silicon Valley rift was already running incredibly hot. Earlier in 2026, the Trump administration labeled Anthropic a Department of Defense supply chain risk, which is a designation usually reserved for foreign adversaries. Defense contractors were forced to certify they didn't use Claude models, and Anthropic actually has ongoing litigation against the administration over this exact blacklisting.
And that brings us to a massive strategic irony. By suddenly disabling top-tier U.S. frontier models, these restrictions actively push global users and developers away. Where are they going to go? Developers are already discussing migrating to rapidly advancing foreign competitors, like China's QN 3.7. They're getting cheaper and they're highly capable. So overregulating at home might just hand a direct advantage to international rivals. Section 3, trillion-dollar market disruptions, the financial shockwave.
The financial momentum here was, well, it was staggering. In March 2025, Anthropic sat at a $61.5 billion valuation. Fast forward just over a year to May 2026, and investors were valuing them at an unbelievable $965 billion. They were literally on the absolute brink of a trillion-dollar valuation, pulling ahead of major players like OpenAI, right before this unprecedented government shutdown hit.
And it wasn't just hype. $47 billion. That represents Anthropic's annualized revenue just before this event. They were growing at an astronomical 130% every single quarter. Economists were calling it some of the most impressive revenue growth in history. And overnight, that entire momentum was put on ice. Section 4. The public sentiment. What America actually wants.
Now, you might be thinking the public was outraged alongside the tech industry, but the data shows something surprising. A massive 71% of the public actually wants the government involved in AI regulation. And this isn't divided by political lines either. It is a solid, bipartisan supermajority across Democrats, Republicans, and independents who want oversight.
But wait, because it gets kind of ironic. Americans want government regulation, right? Yet they have incredibly low trust in the actual institutions involved. Only 20% trust the federal government to make these decisions, and an even lower 15% trust the AI companies themselves. It's basically a landscape of extremely high anxiety and very low trust. And these aren't abstract fears either. 64% of Americans fear AI will displace jobs. 56% worry we'll become cognitively dependent and literally unable to think for ourselves. Nearly half want AI companies held legally liable for harm, and 44% explicitly want to prioritize safety over growth. So when the government pulled the plug on Fable 5, citing national security, they were tapping into a public that is already incredibly wary of how fast this tech is moving. Section 5. The fallout. The future of AI access. So what does this all mean for us? Well, it brings us to a harsh realization. If a narrow, debatable jailbreak can force a total, unannounced commercial shutdown of a major platform, then literally every frontier AI model is now at risk. For developers, businesses, and hobbyists who rely on these tools every single day, the killing effect is absolutely real. The core software you use to do your job could be turned off instantly without any public explanation. Which leaves us with a pretty heavy, lingering question. The tech exists. The capabilities are scaling exponentially. But if government intervention can happen this swiftly and this totally, we have to ask, will the public actually be allowed to use frontier AI once it becomes powerful enough to truly matter? Or will our most advanced tools just remain locked behind export controls and national security directives? It's a question that is absolutely going to define the next decade of innovation. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.